The truck stop hummed with the usual noise of diesel engines and tired travelers. Families stretched their legs near the restrooms. Truckers grabbed coffee and kept moving. No one paid attention to the little girl standing by the entrance. She was maybe 7 years old. Her jacket hung open, the zipper broken and useless against the cold November air. Her blonde hair was tangled. Her sneakers were too small, but it was her stillness that did not belong. Children fidget. They look around. They ask questions. This girl did none of those things. She stood like a statue, her eyes fixed on nothing, her small body rigid. A man stood beside her. He wore clean jeans and a gray pullover. His hand rested on her shoulder. To anyone walking past, it looked like a father waiting with his daughter. His smile was easy. His posture was relaxed. He looked like safety, but his thumb pressed into the soft spot just below her collarbone. Not hard enough to bruise, just hard enough to remind her. A few feet away, the girl's mother held a cardboard sign. The words were written in black marker. They asked for help. Gas money? A ride? Anything. The woman's face showed every sleepless night of the past month. Her coat was thin. Her hands were chapped. But her eyes held something that looked like hope. She looked at the man beside her daughter and smiled. He had offered them a ride to the shelter 3 towns over. He said he had a sister who worked there. He said they would be safe. The mother believed him. She had no reason not to. Kindness was rare. She was not about to question it. The girl believed nothing. Her right hand hung at her side, pressed flat against her thigh. Her fingers were spread wide. She was not fidgeting. She was not scratching an itch. She was pushing her palm into her leg so hard that her knuckles had gone white. It was a signal she did not know she was sending. 30 yards away, near the diesel pumps, a man sat on a black motorcycle. His name was Marcus Reeves, but the people who rode with him called him Ghost. He had earned the name years ago for the way he moved through trouble without making a sound. He was 53 years old. His beard was gray. His leather jacket was worn soft from a decade of highway miles. He had stopped for gas and nothing more, but he had not pulled away. Something held him in place. He watched the man in the gray pullover. He watched the way the man's hand stayed locked on the girl's shoulder. He watched the way the man's eyes moved across the parking lot, checking faces, checking exits, checking threats. That was not how a father looked at a truck stop. That was how a predator looked at a hunting ground. Marcus killed his engine. The silence that followed felt heavy. The girl's head turned. Just a fraction. Just enough to let her eyes sweep the lot without moving her body. She was looking for something. Or someone. Her gaze passed over the families, the truckers, the tired travelers. None of them saw her. Then her eyes found Marcus. She did not wave. She did not call out. She did not move at all. But something in her face cracked open. It was the look of someone drowning who had just seen a hand reach toward the water. Marcus felt it land in his chest like a stone. The man in the gray pullover spoke to the mother. His voice was warm and friendly. He gestured toward the back of the lot where a white van sat parked in the shadows. The mother nodded and picked up her small bag. She looked relieved. She looked grateful. She had no idea what she was walking toward. The girl's fingers pressed harder against her thigh. Her breathing went shallow. Her eyes stayed locked on Marcus. He had no proof. He had no authority. He had no business stepping into a stranger's life based on a feeling. He could be wrong. The man could be exactly what he claimed to be. Marcus could walk over there and cause a scene and ruin a good deed. But he had seen that posture before. He had seen fear worn quietly in places most people never looked. He had learned the hard way what happened when good men decided something was not their business. The man in the gray pullover placed his other hand on the mother's back and guided her forward. The girl had no choice but to move with them. Her feet shuffled across the pavement. Her eyes stayed on Marcus until the last possible second. The van's side door slid open. The sound cut through the parking lot like a warning. Marcus was 30 feet away. He had seconds to decide. He stepped off his bike. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday. Sarah Brennan stood in the doorway of her apartment and read the paper 3 times. The words did not change. She had 14 days to leave. She had been behind on rent for 3 months. The waitressing job at the diner had ended in August when the owner closed the doors without warning. She had applied everywhere. Grocery stores, gas stations, cleaning services. No one called back. The bills kept coming. The landlord stopped waiting. There was no family to call. Her mother had passed 2 years ago. Her father had left before she could remember his face. She had no siblings. No cousins close enough to ask. The friends she once had drifted away when the money ran out. That was how it worked. Poverty made people invisible. She looked across the small living room at her daughter. Lily sat on the couch with a coloring book open on her lap. She was 6 years old. Her hair was the color of wheat. Her eyes were too serious for a child her age. She did not ask what the paper said. She already knew something was wrong. Sarah folded the notice and put it in her pocket. She smiled at her daughter and told her they were going on an adventure. Lily nodded. She did not smile back. They packed what they could into 2 backpacks: clothes, a blanket, Lily's stuffed rabbit with the torn ear. Sarah left behind the furniture, the dishes, the photos on the wall. She left behind the life she had tried so hard to build. She locked the door for the last time and walked away before the sheriff could arrive. The first 3 nights, they stayed at a church shelter on the east side of town. The beds were narrow and the room smelled like bleach, but it was warm. Lily slept curled against her mother's side. She did not cry. She did not ask questions. She simply held on. On the 4th night, the shelter was full. A woman at the front desk looked at Sarah with tired eyes and said there was no room. She gave them a list of other shelters. All of them were across town. All of them had waiting lists. Sarah thanked her and walked back out into the cold. They found an overpass where other homeless people had gathered. A man with a shopping cart nodded at them. A woman wrapped in a sleeping bag looked up and then looked away. No one spoke. There was nothing to say. Sarah laid their blanket on the concrete and pulled Lily close. The wind cut through the gaps in the structure above them. Lily shivered but did not complain. She pressed her face against her mother's shoulder and closed her eyes. The days that followed blurred together. Sarah stood near the truck stop with a cardboard sign. She wrote the words carefully. She did not ask for much. Gas money, food, anything would help. God bless. Some truckers gave a few dollars. Some handed her granola bars or bottles of water. Most walked past without looking. She learned not to take it personally. Everyone was carrying something heavy. By the 5th day, Lily had not eaten a real meal. Sarah found a donation bin behind a gas station and pulled out a sleeve of crackers. The crackers were stale and soft. She handed them to Lily and watched her daughter eat them slowly, one small bite at a time, making them last. Something inside Sarah's chest cracked open. She had failed. She had done everything she could, and it was not enough. Her daughter was hungry and cold, and there was nothing left to give. She would do anything to feed her child. Anything at all. That was when Derek Hollins appeared. He walked across the parking lot with a paper bag in his hand. His clothes were clean. His smile was warm. He stopped in front of Sarah and held out the bag. Inside was a sandwich wrapped in foil and a bottle of juice. He told her his name. He said he worked with a church group that helped families in need. He said there was a shelter 3 towns over with real beds and hot meals. He said he could give them a ride whenever they were ready. Sarah looked at the sandwich. She looked at her daughter. She looked at the man standing in front of her with kindness in his eyes. She felt something loosen in her chest. Hope. It had been so long since she felt it. She thanked him. Her voice cracked on the words. Derek smiled and told her there was no rush. He wrote his phone number on a napkin and pressed it into her hand. He said to call when she was ready. He said everything was going to be okay. He turned and walked back across the lot. He waved once before climbing into a white van parked near the edge of the pavement. Sarah watched him go. She clutched the napkin like it was a lifeline. Beside her, Lily stood perfectly still. Her eyes followed Derek until the van pulled away. Her small hand found her mother's sleeve and gripped it tight. She did not speak. She did not move. She watched him the way a rabbit watches a fox moving through the grass. Derek Hollins had done this many times before. He knew exactly how to move. He knew exactly what to say. He had spent years learning the patterns of desperate people, where they gathered, what they needed, how long it took before trust replaced caution. He was not a church volunteer. There was no shelter waiting 3 towns over. There was no sister who worked with homeless families. Every word he spoke was a tool designed to open doors that should have stayed locked. Derek found his targets in predictable places: truck stops, highway rest areas, overpasses where the forgotten people slept. He looked for women traveling alone with children, women whose eyes carried exhaustion, women who had stopped expecting help and would not question it when it finally arrived. He offered food first, then blankets, then conversation. He listened more than he spoke. He nodded at the right moments. He never pushed. He let them come to him. Some families he took to the farmhouse outside of town. The farmhouse was real. The work waiting for them there was also real. They cleaned. They cooked. They did whatever Derek told them to do. They stayed because they had nowhere else to go. They stayed because leaving meant returning to nothing. Some families never left the farmhouse at all. Derek had never been caught because he chose his victims carefully. Homeless women did not file police reports. Undocumented immigrants did not call for help. Runaways did not want to be found. The people Derek targeted had already fallen through every crack in the system. No one came looking for them. No one noticed when they disappeared. Sarah and Lily fit the pattern perfectly. A mother alone with a young child. No car, no phone, no family waiting somewhere with a spare bedroom. No one who would ask questions if they vanished from the truck stop and never came back. Derek returned the next day with a bag of fast food. He handed Lily a chicken sandwich and watched her eat. He asked Sarah how she had slept. He listened to her answer with patience and concern. He told her the shelter was still available whenever she was ready. Sarah thanked him. She meant it. Kindness had become so rare that she could not see the shape hiding behind it. The following day, Derek brought a blanket. It was thick and soft and clean. He wrapped it around Lily's shoulders and smiled at her. He told her she was a brave little girl. His hand rested on her arm for just a moment too long. Lily did not pull away. She had learned not to make trouble, but something inside her went still and cold. She looked at the ground and waited for him to stop touching her. Derek noticed. He always noticed, but he did not change his approach. Children were easy to manage once the mother was on his side. All he needed was time. On the third day, he brought hot soup in styrofoam cups. He sat with Sarah on the curb and talked about the farmhouse. He described the rooms, the warm beds, the kitchen where families cooked meals together. He made it sound like a home. Sarah asked if there was paperwork. Derek shook his head and told her the program was private. No government involvement. No questions about her past. Just people helping people. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. Her daughter was hungry and cold and growing thinner by the day. If there was even a chance this man was telling the truth, she had to take it. Lily sat a few feet away with the blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. She watched Derek speak. She watched the way his eyes moved to her mother's face and then back to her own. She did not understand the feeling growing in her chest. She only knew that when Derek looked at her, something inside her wanted to run. Her right hand found her thigh. She pressed her palm flat against her leg and spread her fingers wide. She did not know why she did it. Her body simply needed to hold on to something solid, something real, something that was still hers. On the fifth day, Derek told Sarah the farmhouse was ready. He said there was a room waiting for them. He said they could leave today if she wanted. Sarah looked at her daughter. She looked at the empty soup cup in her hands. She looked at the cold concrete beneath her feet. She said yes. Derek smiled and led them across the parking lot. His van was parked in the back corner, away from the diesel pumps, away from the foot traffic, away from watching eyes. Lily walked beside her mother. Her hand pressed harder against her leg. Her breathing went shallow. She looked back at the truck stop one last time. Her eyes found a man in leather standing beside a black motorcycle. He was watching them. His face was still. His hands hung at his sides. Lily did not know him. She did not know his name, but something in her chest reached toward him like a hand stretching out of deep water. She begged him silently to see what she could not say. Marcus Reeves pulled into the truck stop with nothing on his mind but fuel and the long road home. He had been riding since dawn. The charity event had gone well. Over 200 bikers showed up to raise money for a children's hospital in the next county. They had ridden together through 3 towns, engines rumbling in formation, drawing waves from families standing on sidewalks. It was a good day, the kind of day that reminded him why he still wore the patch. But good days always carried weight. They reminded him of the days that were not good, the days that had broken something inside him that would never fully heal. He swung his leg off the bike and stood in the cold afternoon air. His body ached. His eyes were tired. He wanted nothing more than to fill the tank, grab a coffee, and disappear into the quiet of his shop. That was when he saw the little girl. She stood near the entrance of the truck stop beside a man in clean clothes. Her jacket was unzipped. Her shoes were too small. Her hair was tangled and unwashed. But it was not her appearance that caught his attention. It was her stillness. Children moved. They fidgeted. They looked around with curiosity or boredom or impatience. This child did none of those things. She stood like something had frozen her from the inside out. Marcus did not move. He watched. The man beside her had a hand on her shoulder. His posture was relaxed. His smile was warm. To anyone passing by, he looked like a father or an uncle, someone safe, someone familiar. But his thumb pressed into the soft hollow beneath the girl's collarbone. It was a small gesture, almost invisible, the kind of thing only someone who had seen it before would recognize. Marcus had seen it before. 8 years ago, he had a daughter named Emma. She had blonde hair and a laugh that sounded like bells ringing in the wind. She was 4 years old when the doctors found the cancer. She fought for 2 years. She fought harder than anyone should have to fight, and then she was gone. Marcus never recovered. His marriage ended 6 months later. His faith in the world crumbled like ash in his hands. He stopped believing that good things lasted. He stopped believing that the universe cared, who lived and who died. But his brothers held him together. The club became his family when his family fell apart. The road became his church. Riding became the only prayer he still knew how to speak. He carried Emma's photograph in his wallet, a small square tucked behind his license where no one would ever see it. He never showed it to anyone. He never spoke her name out loud, but she was with him on every ride. She was with him now. Since her death, Marcus had become quietly vigilant about children in danger. He volunteered with a group of bikers who escorted abused kids to court. They would surround the child with leather and chrome, standing guard so the kid could testify without fear. The work did not bring Emma back. Nothing could bring Emma back, but it gave him a reason to keep moving forward. He learned to read the signs that others missed. The way a child's body went still when fear took hold. The way their eyes scanned for exits. The way their hands pressed flat against their legs as if trying to hold themselves together. The little girl at the truck stop was doing all of those things. Her mother stood a few feet away with a cardboard sign in her hands. She looked exhausted, hopeful, relieved that someone was finally helping them. She had no idea what was happening. She could not see what Marcus saw. The man in clean clothes gestured toward the back of the parking lot. A white van sat parked in the shadows near the edge of the pavement. The mother nodded and picked up her bag. She began walking toward the van with trust in her steps. The child did not trust. Her feet shuffled forward because she had no choice. Her hand pressed harder against her thigh. Her eyes swept the lot one final time. They found Marcus. He felt the impact of her gaze land in his chest. It was not a look of hope. It was the look of someone who had stopped hoping. Someone who was screaming without making a sound. Someone who needed a stranger to see what no one else could see. Marcus reached into his pocket. His fingers brushed the edge of Emma's photograph. He had no proof. He had no authority. He had no plan. But he had lived with regret long enough to know what it felt like. He had carried the weight of moments when he should have acted and did not. He was not going to carry this one. The van's side door slid open. The man placed his hand on the mother's back and guided her forward. Marcus stepped away from his bike and began walking toward the van. His boots made no sound on the pavement. His face showed nothing, but inside his chest, something old and broken was waking up. If he did nothing, this moment would haunt him for the rest of his life. Marcus closed the distance one step at a time. He kept his movements slow and casual. His hands stayed visible at his sides. His face showed nothing. To anyone watching from across the lot, he looked like a man wandering toward his parked car. Just another traveler passing through, but his eyes never left the van. Derek stood at the open side door with one hand resting on the frame. The mother was already stepping forward, ready to help her daughter climb inside. The little girl had not moved. Her feet were planted on the pavement like roots growing into concrete. Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket. He pretended to check the screen while continuing to walk. It was a simple trick. People ignored anyone looking at their phone. It made him invisible in plain sight. He was close enough now to see inside the van. Blankets were folded neatly on the floor. Bottles of water lined the back wall. A child's car seat sat strapped to one of the benches. The setup looked helpful. It looked prepared. It looked like exactly what a church volunteer would bring to transport a homeless family. But Marcus noticed details that did not belong. The windows were tinted so dark he could barely see through them. The license plate was caked with dried mud that made the numbers impossible to read. There was no church name painted on the side panels. No logo. No phone number for families to verify. A real charity would want to be found. This van wanted to disappear. Sarah reached for Lily's hand. She smiled down at her daughter and told her it was time to go. Her voice was tired but hopeful. She had no idea what she was walking into. Lily did not take her mother's hand. She stood frozen with her palm still pressed flat against her thigh. Marcus stopped walking. He was 10 feet away now. close enough to speak without raising his voice. He looked at Sarah and asked if she needed directions somewhere. His tone was calm and friendly, the kind of voice that did not demand answers, the kind of voice that simply offered a door. Sarah turned to look at him. Confusion flickered across her face. She told him they were fine. A friend was giving them a ride. Marcus nodded slowly. He asked if she had known this friend long. Sarah hesitated. She glanced at Derek, then back at Marcus. She admitted they had just met a few days ago. But he had been so kind. He worked with a church that helped families. Marcus kept his voice even. He asked if she had seen any identification, a business card, a phone number for the church, anything that could be verified. Sarah opened her mouth to answer. No words came out. Her eyes moved back to Derek. Something shifted in her expression, a tiny crack in the certainty she had been holding on to. Lily watched the conversation without blinking, her hand pressed harder against her leg. But her eyes had changed. The emptiness was still there. The fear was still there. But now there was something else growing beneath the surface. Hope. Derek stepped forward with his smile still in place. He told Marcus they appreciated the concern, but everything was under control. His voice was smooth and warm. He reached out and placed his hand on Sarah's back, guiding her gently toward the van. Marcus did not move. He looked at Sarah and asked if anyone else knew where she was going today. A friend, a family member, anyone who could check in on her later. Sarah's face went pale. She realized she had no one. No one knew she was leaving. No one would come looking if she disappeared. Derek's smile flickered. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Marcus to see the mask slip. Derek told Sarah they should get going. The farmhouse was waiting. They did not want to keep people waiting. Sarah looked at her daughter. Lily was staring at Marcus with an intensity that did not belong on a 6-year-old's face. Her small body was trembling. Her hand had not moved from her thigh. Marcus spoke again. He was not looking at Derek anymore. He was looking directly at Lily. He asked her if she wanted to go with this man. Lily did not answer. Her lips stayed pressed together, but her eyes filled with something that words could not carry. Derek's hand tightened on Sarah's arm. His fingers pressed into her sleeve with a force that was no longer gentle. Sarah noticed. She looked down at his grip. She looked up at his face. The warmth was gone. The kindness had drained away like water through a cracked bowl. Derek told Marcus to mind his own business. His voice was still calm, but the edges had turned sharp. Marcus took one step closer. His boots scraped against the pavement. His eyes never left Derek's face. The moment of decision had arrived for everyone standing in that parking lot. Derek's laugh cut through the tension like a blade wrapped in velvet. He spread his hands wide and shook his head as if Marcus had just told a joke that missed the mark. He told Sarah not to worry. He said some people just like to cause trouble. He called Marcus a concerned citizen with too much time on his hands. His voice stayed friendly. His smile stayed in place. But his eyes had gone flat and cold. Marcus did not respond. He stood exactly where he was, with his phone still in his hand. His thumb moved across the screen. He raised the phone to his ear and began to speak. His voice was calm and clear, loud enough to carry across the parking lot. He said he was at the truck stop off the interstate. He described a white van with no markings parked near the back of the lot. He read the license plate number slowly, pausing between each letter and digit. He said a man was attempting to transport a woman and child to an unknown location. He requested an officer respond to the scene. Derek's smile vanished. He had not expected this. Men like Marcus usually walked away. They did not want trouble. They did not want to get involved. They looked the other way and told themselves it was not their business. But Marcus was not walking away. He was standing in the middle of the parking lot announcing Derek's presence to anyone within earshot. A trucker filling his rig at the diesel pump turned to watch. A woman at the gas station entrance stopped walking and pulled out her own phone. A man loading groceries into his car set down his bags and stared. Derek felt the walls closing in. He grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her toward the van. His grip was no longer gentle. His fingers dug into her sleeve with a force that left no room for argument. He told her they needed to go now. He said the farmhouse would not wait forever. Sarah stumbled forward. Her eyes went wide. She looked down at the hand gripping her arm and saw the truth that had been hiding behind all those warm smiles. This was not kindness. This was control. She tried to pull away. Derek held on tighter. He told her she was making a mistake. He said she would regret this. He said no one else would help her. He said she would end up back on the street with nothing. His voice had turned sharp. The warmth had drained away completely. Lily stood frozen beside her mother. Her hand was still pressed flat against her thigh. Her eyes moved back and forth between Derek and Marcus. She did not speak. She did not cry. She simply waited to see which world she would be forced to live in. Marcus took another step forward. His phone was still raised. His face showed no emotion. But his presence filled the space between them like a wall that refused to move. He asked Sarah one more time if she wanted to get in that van. Sarah looked at her daughter. She saw the fear written across Lily's face. She saw the way Lily's body leaned away from Derek even as his hand held them in place. She saw everything she had been too tired and too desperate to see before. She pulled her arm free. Derek released her so suddenly that she stumbled backward. Lily caught her mother's hand and held on tight. Derek's face twisted into something ugly. He told Sarah she was going to regret this. He said she had no idea what she was giving up. He said she would remember this moment when she was sleeping under a bridge in the dead of winter. Sarah did not answer. She pulled Lily behind her and stepped away from the van. The trucker at the diesel pump set down his fuel nozzle and walked closer. The woman near the entrance had her phone raised, recording everything. 2 more travelers had stopped to watch from across the lot. Derek was surrounded. He looked at the faces staring at him from every direction. He looked at the phones pointed his way. He looked at Marcus standing 10 feet away with a calm that could not be shaken. There was nothing left to save. The game was over. Derek climbed into the driver's seat and slammed the door. The engine roared to life. The tires screeched against the pavement as the van lurched forward and tore across the parking lot toward the exit. Marcus watched him go. He did not chase. He did not shout. He simply raised his phone one more time and captured a clear photograph of the license plate before the van disappeared onto the highway. Then he turned and walked toward Sarah and Lily. The little girl looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her eyes said everything. Sarah held her daughter close and tried to find the words to thank him. But the danger was not over yet. Sarah stood in the middle of the parking lot with her daughter pressed against her side. Her hands were shaking. Her breath came in short, uneven bursts. The adrenaline that had carried her through the last few minutes was fading, and reality was crashing down in its place. She had almost put her daughter in that van. She had almost trusted a man she did not know. She had almost made a mistake that could never be undone. Lily held onto her mother's coat with both hands. Her small fingers were white at the knuckles. She did not speak. She did not cry. She simply held on, as if letting go meant falling into something dark and endless. Marcus stood a few feet away. He did not move closer. He did not speak. He simply waited with his hands at his sides, giving them the space they needed to breathe. The trucker who had walked over was on the phone now, describing the van to someone on the other end of the line. The woman near the gas station was talking to another traveler, gesturing toward the spot where Derek's van had been parked. The parking lot buzzed with the energy of people who had witnessed something they did not fully understand. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked at Marcus and asked him why he had stopped, why he had cared enough to get involved. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. His eyes moved to Lily, then back to Sarah. He told her he had lost someone once, a long time ago. He said he could not save her no matter how hard he tried. He said he made a promise to himself after that. He would never look away when a child was in danger. He would never pretend it was not his business. His voice was steady. There was no self-pity in his words, just truth spoken plainly. Sarah felt something crack open inside her chest. The tears came before she could stop them. She told Marcus everything. The eviction, the nights under the overpass, the hunger that had hollowed out her daughter's cheeks, the desperation that had made Derek's lies sound like salvation. She apologized for almost trusting him. She said she should have known better. She said she had failed her daughter. Marcus shook his head slowly. He told her she had not failed. He said she had been trying to survive. He said the only person who failed was the man who tried to take advantage of that. Sarah looked at her daughter. Lily was still pressed against her side, but her grip had loosened slightly. Her eyes were fixed on Marcus with an expression that was no longer filled with fear. It was the first calm look Sarah had seen on her daughter's face in weeks. Marcus made a decision. He did not hesitate. He did not weigh the risks or consider the complications. He simply spoke. He told Sarah that she and Lily were coming with him. He said he had a small house on the other side of town. There was a spare room with a bed and clean sheets. They could stay as long as they needed. No strings, no expectations. Just a safe place to rest while they figured out their next step. Sarah stared at him. She wanted to believe him. Every part of her ached to say yes. But she had just learned what happened when she trusted strangers. She asked him why. Why would he help them? What did he want in return? Marcus looked at Lily. He saw blonde hair and tired eyes and a stillness that no child should carry. He saw echoes of a face he would never stop missing. He told Sarah that some things did not need a reason. He said sometimes you just did what was right because it was right. That was all. Sarah looked at her daughter. Lily looked back at her. Something passed between them that did not need words. Sarah took a breath. She nodded slowly. She told Lily to pick up her backpack. She said they were going somewhere safe. Lily bent down and grabbed the worn straps of her bag. She pulled it onto her shoulders and stood up straight. For the first time in days, she did not look like she was waiting for something terrible to happen. Marcus turned and walked toward his motorcycle. He told them to wait by the entrance while he made a phone call. He needed to arrange a ride. His bike could not carry all three of them. Sarah watched him go. She held Lily's hand and felt the warmth of her daughter's fingers against her palm. They were going home. Even though home was now a stranger's house. Even though nothing about their future was certain. But for the first time in weeks, Sarah felt something she had forgotten how to feel. She felt safe. The truck moved slowly down the quiet road as the afternoon light began to fade. Sarah sat in the passenger seat with her hands folded in her lap. She stared out the window without really seeing the trees and houses passing by. Her mind was still back at the truck stop. Her body was still shaking from what had almost happened. Lily sat in the back seat with her seatbelt pulled tight across her chest. Her backpack rested on the seat beside her. She watched the world scroll past the glass with an expression that held no expectation. She had learned not to expect anything. Marcus kept his eyes on the road. He drove the way he did everything. Steady, calm, without unnecessary movement. After a few minutes of silence, he began to talk. He told Sarah he was a mechanic. He owned a small shop on the east side of town. He fixed motorcycles mostly, but he could work on cars and trucks when people needed help. He had been doing it for almost 20 years. Sarah listened without responding. She did not know what to believe anymore. Marcus told her he was part of the Hells Angels. He said the name slowly, giving her time to react. He knew what people thought when they heard those words. He knew the stories they had seen on television and in movies. But he told her his chapter was different. They did charity rides for children's hospitals. They escorted abuse survivors to court so they could testify without fear. They collected toys at Christmas and delivered them to shelters. They were not the outlaws people imagined. They were fathers and grandfathers and uncles who had decided to use their brotherhood for something good. Sarah turned her head and looked at him. She searched his face for a lie. She found nothing but tired honesty. She asked him why he lived alone. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. He told her he used to have a family, a wife, a daughter. He said his daughter got sick when she was 4 years old. He said she fought for 2 years before she stopped fighting. His voice did not break, but something in his eyes went far away. Sarah did not ask any more questions after that. The truck turned onto a narrow street lined with small houses. Marcus pulled into the driveway of a white house with green shutters. The paint was faded but clean. A garden grew in the front yard, slightly overgrown but not forgotten. They walked to the front door. Marcus unlocked it and stepped aside to let them enter first. The inside was simple and warm. The living room held a worn couch and a wooden coffee table. The walls were covered with photographs, motorcycles lined up at rallies, landscapes from long rides through mountain passes, and, in the corner, a single frame holding the face of a little girl with golden hair and a smile that looked like sunshine. Marcus led them down a short hallway and opened a door at the end. The spare room was small but clean. A bed with a blue quilt sat against the wall. A wooden dresser stood near the closet. A window looked out onto the backyard where an old oak tree spread its branches wide. He told them to rest. He said there was food in the kitchen whenever they were hungry. He said they were safe here. Lily walked to the bed and sat down slowly. She looked around the room like she had stepped into a dream she did not trust. Her hand reached out and touched the pillow. Her fingers pressed into the softness like she had forgotten what comfort felt like. Sarah stood in the doorway and watched her daughter. She could not speak. She could only breathe. That night, Marcus cooked dinner. Pasta with tomato sauce, warm bread from a loaf he had picked up earlier in the week, steamed vegetables from a can. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated. Lily ate like someone who had been starving for days. Because she had. She did not speak between bites. She did not look up from her plate. She simply ate with the focus of a child who did not know when the next meal would come. Sarah sat across from her with tears running silently down her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. She did not try to hide them. Marcus pretended not to notice. He refilled Lily's plate without being asked. He poured more water into her glass. He moved through the kitchen like a man who understood that silence was sometimes the kindest gift. After dinner, Sarah put Lily to bed. The little girl fell asleep within minutes, her face pressed against the soft pillow, her body finally still. Marcus walked out onto the porch and sat down in an old wooden chair. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. His voice was low and steady. He told the man on the other end about Derek. He described the van. He gave the license plate number. He said this man had been hunting families at truck stops and shelters. He said they needed to find out who he was and how many others he had hurt. The voice on the other end promised to make calls. Marcus hung up and stared out at the darkening sky. The work was just beginning. The phone calls started coming before midnight. Marcus sat on his porch with the night air settling around him. His phone buzzed against the wooden armrest. One call, then another, then a text message with a photograph attached. His brothers were already working. The first lead came from a man named Ricky who ran security for a trucking company 2 counties over. He traced the license plate Marcus had photographed to a rental agency near the state line. The van had been rented 3 weeks ago. The payment was cash. The ID used to sign the paperwork was fake. That alone was enough to raise flags. But Ricky kept digging. He found a forum where truckers shared warnings about suspicious activity at rest stops and highway stations. 3 different drivers had posted about a white van with no markings that appeared near truck stops in different states. One driver described seeing a man matching Derek's description talking to homeless families near the fuel pumps. Another mentioned a woman and child climbing into a similar van near a rest area in Tennessee. The woman was never seen again. Marcus read the messages on his phone with his jaw clenched tight. His stomach turned cold. By morning, more information had arrived. A brother named Dwayne, who worked as a dispatcher, pulled records from trucking routes that crossed the region. He found patterns. The van appeared near shelters and overpasses in a rough circle that covered 4 states. It moved every few days. It never stayed in one place long enough to attract attention. Another brother named Cole reached out to a contact who worked with a non-profit that tracked human trafficking cases. The contact confirmed what Marcus already suspected. Derek Hollins was not a random predator. He was part of something larger. He found the victims. Others moved them. Others exploited them. The picture was becoming clear. Derek was a hunter, and he had been hunting for a long time. Marcus gathered the information into a folder. Photographs, license plate records, forum posts, dates and locations. He did not want to miss anything. He drove to the police station that afternoon. He asked to speak with a detective. The officer at the front desk looked at his leather jacket and his gray beard and hesitated for a moment before making the call. A detective named Harper came out to meet him. She was in her 40s with short brown hair and tired eyes. She looked at Marcus the way most people looked at bikers. Suspicious, guarded. Marcus did not take it personally. He understood why people judged the patch. He had spent years proving them wrong. He explained what had happened at the truck stop. He described Derek's behavior. He described the van and the setup inside. He handed over the folder with everything his brothers had found. Detective Harper listened without interrupting. Her expression shifted as she turned the pages. The skepticism in her eyes faded. Something sharper took its place. She asked Marcus how he knew to look for these details. He told her about the charity work, the court escorts, the years spent learning the signs that most people missed. Harper nodded slowly. She told him she would open an investigation. She said the evidence was stronger than most tips she received. She thanked him for coming forward. Marcus drove home with the weight on his chest, feeling slightly lighter. 3 days passed. Sarah and Lily stayed in the spare room. They slept. They ate. They began to breathe again. Lily slept through the night for the first time in weeks. She did not wake up crying. She did not press her hand against her thigh in the darkness. She simply slept. Her face soft against the pillow. Her body finally still. Sarah showered and washed her hair. She ate meals at the kitchen table instead of standing over a donation bin. She looked in the mirror and saw a woman she almost recognized. The exhaustion was still there, but something else was growing beneath it. Something that felt like hope. She did not know what the future held. She had no job, no savings, no plan. But her daughter was safe. For now, that was enough. Marcus watched them heal without saying much. He cooked meals. He answered questions when they asked. He gave them space when they needed it. He felt something stirring in his chest that he had not felt in years. It was not happiness. It was not peace. It was purpose. The feeling that his life still had meaning, that he could still do something that mattered. On the fourth morning, his phone rang. Detective Harper's voice was steady on the other end. She told Marcus that Derek Hollins had been identified. His real name was David Henley. He had warrants in 2 states. He was connected to 4 missing persons cases across the region. Police were moving to arrest him. Marcus thanked her and hung up. He walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the backyard where the old oak tree stood in the morning light. The hunt was almost over. The motel room door splintered inward just before dawn. Derek Hollins was alone when the officers found him. He was sitting on the edge of the bed with his shoes still on, staring at the wall like a man who had been waiting for this moment longer than he wanted to admit. He did not run. He did not fight. He simply raised his hands and let them take him. The white van sat parked outside in the gravel lot. Officers sealed it off with yellow tape and began the search before the sun had fully risen. Inside, they found blankets folded neatly against the walls, bottles of water lined up in rows, a child's car seat strapped to the bench, and beneath the floor panels, hidden in a compartment that had been welded shut and then pried open again, they found what they were looking for. Photographs? Dozens of them. Faces of women and children taken at truck stops and shelters across 4 states. Phone numbers written on scraps of paper. A small leather journal filled with handwritten notes about potential targets. Names, locations, details about their situations that made them vulnerable. On one page, halfway through the journal, 2 names stood out. Sarah, Lily. Beneath them, a single word was written in neat block letters. Ready. The arrest made the local news that evening. A reporter stood outside the motel with the police tape fluttering behind her. She described how a routine tip at a truck stop had led to the unraveling of a trafficking operation that stretched across state lines. She used words like network and coordination, an ongoing investigation. Marcus's name was never mentioned. He preferred it that way. Sarah watched the report from the living room of Marcus's house. She sat on the worn couch with her hands pressed together in her lap. Her fingers trembled as Derek's face appeared on the screen. The photograph was a mugshot. His eyes were flat and empty. The warmth and kindness she had believed in were nowhere to be found. She realized how close she had come, how close her daughter had come. The van, the farmhouse, the things that happened to people who climbed inside and never came back. Her chest tightened until she could barely breathe. Lily sat beside her mother with her legs tucked beneath her. She watched the screen without speaking. She did not fully understand the words the reporter was using, but she understood the feeling that settled into her small body when she saw Derek's face. The bad man was gone. He could not hurt them anymore. She looked across the room to where Marcus stood near the kitchen doorway. He had not said anything since the news began. He simply watched, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression calm and steady. Lily did not smile, but something in her shoulders loosened. Something in her chest stopped pressing so hard. The biker, with the quiet eyes, had kept them safe. In the weeks that followed, more victims came forward. Families who had escaped before Derek could finish what he started. Women who had not been so lucky. The case grew larger than anyone had expected. Federal investigators became involved. Charges multiplied. Names were added to the list of people who had participated in the network. Marcus received a call from Detective Harper. She asked if he would testify in a closed hearing. The prosecutors needed someone who could describe what had happened at the truck stop, someone who had seen the operation in action. Marcus agreed without hesitation. He arrived at the courthouse on a Tuesday morning. His club brothers came with him. A dozen men in leather cuts lined the gallery benches. They did not speak. They did not need to. Their presence said everything. Marcus took the stand and described what he had seen. The little girl standing too still. The mother who trusted too easily. The man whose kindness was a mask for something darker. He spoke calmly and clearly. He answered every question with precision. The judge listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, she thanked him for his vigilance. She called him observant and courageous. The prosecutor used a different word. She called him a hero. Marcus did not feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had finally done something right. A man who had seen a child in danger and refused to look away. That was all. The hearing ended. The gallery emptied. Marcus walked out into the hallway and stopped near a window that looked down over the parking lot. He stood there for a long moment, watching the cars pass below, feeling the weight in his chest begin to shift. Then he heard footsteps behind him. He turned and found Sarah standing a few feet away. Her hands were clasped in front of her. Her eyes were red but clear. She told him she had been waiting. She said there was something she needed to say. Something she had been carrying since the night he brought them home. Marcus waited. Sarah took a breath. Sarah stood in the courthouse hallway with her hands clasped in front of her. She had been waiting for Marcus to finish testifying. She had watched him walk out of the courtroom with his brothers behind him. She had seen the way he stopped near the window and stood alone, looking out at the parking lot below. Now she was standing in front of him with words caught in her throat. Marcus turned to face her. He did not speak. He simply waited the way he always did. Patient. Steady. Giving her the space to find what she needed to say. Sarah told him she had something important to share. She said she had been thinking about it for weeks. She said she was afraid to say it out loud because saying it would make it real. Marcus nodded once. His eyes stayed on her face. Sarah told him that she and Lily wanted to stay. Not as guests. Not as people passing through on their way to somewhere else. They wanted to be part of his life. They wanted him to be part of theirs. She explained that she had found a job. A diner on the main street in town had hired her as a waitress. The pay was not much, but it was steady. She was already saving for an apartment. She was already building something that felt like a future. But the future she imagined had Marcus in it. She told him that Lily needed someone stable, someone strong, someone who showed up and stayed. She said Lily had never known a father. The men who passed through her early years had been shadows at best and dangers at worst. Marcus was different. Marcus was real. Sarah asked him if he would be willing to stay in Lily's life. Not as a stranger who helped once. Not as a memory that would fade with time. But as someone permanent. Someone Lily could count on. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. His hands stayed at his sides. His face showed nothing. He had spent 8 years avoiding this. He had built walls around his heart after Emma died. He had promised himself that he would never let anyone that close again. Loving people meant losing people, and he had already lost more than he could carry. But Lily had found a way through. She had climbed over the walls without asking permission. She had started calling him Ghost, the way his brothers did. She had started drawing pictures and leaving them on the kitchen table for him to find. She had started asking questions about motorcycles and engines and club runs. And she listened to his answers like every word mattered. He had not planned to care about her, but he did. Marcus told Sarah that he could not promise forever. He said he had learned that forever was not something anyone could guarantee. But he could promise today. He could promise to show up. He could promise to be there as long as they wanted him. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She nodded without speaking. The months that followed moved slowly and steadily. The three of them fell into a rhythm that felt natural. Mornings were quiet. Marcus made coffee while Sarah got ready for work. Lily ate cereal at the kitchen table and talked about whatever dreams she had the night before. Evenings were warm. Sarah came home tired but smiling. Marcus cooked dinner while Lily did homework at the counter. They ate together and talked about nothing important, and somehow that made it feel more important than anything. Lily started school in January. She made friends quickly. She came home with stories about classmates and teachers and playground games. She laughed more. She spoke louder. She stopped pressing her hand against her thigh when strangers came near. Sarah worked hard and saved steadily. The jar on the kitchen counter filled with bills and coins. The apartment listings pinned to the refrigerator grew dog-eared from reading. Marcus's club brothers visited often. They brought food and toys and the kind of rough laughter that filled a house with warmth. They treated Sarah with respect, and Lily with a gentleness that surprised her at first. The community began to see the Hells Angels differently. They were not the criminals from television. They were not the outlaws from movies. They were mechanics and truckers and fathers who showed up when it mattered. They were neighbors. In April, Sarah found an apartment she could afford. It was small but clean. 2 bedrooms. A kitchen with a window that looked out over a quiet street. A yard where Lily could play. She showed Marcus the listing with pride in her voice. She told him moving day was 3 weeks away. Marcus smiled and told her she had done well. That night, Lily came to him while he sat on the porch. She climbed onto the chair beside him and looked up at the stars. She asked him a question she had been holding for days. She asked if Ghost could come with them when they moved. Marcus looked at her face in the dim light. He saw hope and fear and something that looked like love. He did not know how to answer. The moving truck pulled up to the curb just after 9 in the morning. Sarah stood on the sidewalk with her hands on her hips and looked up at the small brick building. The windows on the second floor caught the sunlight. One of those windows belonged to her now. One of those windows was the beginning of something she had almost stopped believing was possible. Lily stood beside her with a cardboard box clutched against her chest. The box held her books and crayons, and the stuffed rabbit with the torn ear that had traveled with her through every shelter and overpass and borrowed room. She looked up at the building and asked which window was hers. Sarah pointed to the one on the left. She told Lily it faced east. She said the sunrise would come through every morning like a promise. Lily smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. Marcus's truck pulled up behind the moving van. He stepped out and walked toward them without hurrying. His boots scraped against the pavement. His leather jacket hung open in the spring air. Behind him, 3 more trucks parked along the street. His brothers climbed out one by one. They wore their cuts and carried toolboxes and cans of paint. They nodded at Sarah and ruffled Lily's hair and got to work without being asked. The apartment was empty when they walked inside. The walls were bare. The floors were scuffed. The kitchen smelled faintly of cleaning supplies left behind by the last tenant. By noon, everything had changed. The brothers painted the living room a soft cream color that made the space feel warm. They assembled the bed frames Sarah had bought from a second-hand store. They hung shelves and installed curtain rods and fixed a cabinet door that did not close properly. Marcus worked quietly among them. He carried boxes up the stairs without complaint. He tightened screws and measured twice and made sure everything was level. He did not ask for thanks. He did not expect recognition. He simply did what needed to be done. Sarah moved through the apartment with something growing in her chest. She touched the walls. She opened the cabinets. She stood in the doorway of the bathroom and looked at the small mirror above the sink. This was hers. This was real. This was what survival looked like when it finally turned into living. Lily's room came together last. The brothers painted the walls a pale yellow that reminded Sarah of sunshine. They set up the small bed with the blue quilt from Marcus's spare room. They hung the curtains Sarah had bought with money she earned herself. When it was finished, Lily walked inside and stood in the center of the room. She turned in a slow circle and looked at everything. Her eyes moved from the bed to the window to the small desk in the corner where she could do her homework. She asked Sarah if this was really hers. Sarah knelt down and pulled her daughter close. She told her yes. She said no one could take it away. She promised. Lily held on tight and did not let go. The months that followed moved like seasons changing. Marcus visited every week, sometimes more. He taught Lily to ride a bicycle in the parking lot behind the building. He held the seat while she wobbled and cheered when she finally found her balance. He fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen and replaced the lock on the front door when the old one stuck. He became the steady presence Sarah had never known and Lily had always needed. The club started something new that spring. They partnered with local shelters to identify families at risk. They trained members to recognize the signs of trafficking and exploitation. They became advocates and volunteers, not just riders. Sarah's story had sparked something in them. Her survival had shown them that their work mattered beyond the charity rides and toy drives. In June, the club held a community event at a church hall downtown. Local leaders spoke. Shelter workers shared resources. Families who had been helped stood up and told their stories. Sarah was the last to speak. She walked to the podium with shaking hands and looked out at the crowd. She told them about the eviction, the hunger, the man who pretended to be kind. She told them about the stranger at the truck stop who saw what no one else could see. She did not say Marcus's name until the end. When she finally spoke it, her voice broke. She thanked him for saving her daughter's life. In the audience, Marcus sat with his brothers in the back row. He did not move. He did not smile. But his eyes glistened in the dim light. Lily sat in the front row wearing a small leather jacket the club had given her. She waved at Marcus like he was the most important person in the room. He raised his hand and waved back. After the event ended, Sarah walked toward him with an envelope in her hands. She told him Lily had written something for him. She said he should read it when he was alone. Marcus took the envelope and felt the weight of something small and precious inside. Marcus sat on the porch alone as the sun began its slow descent behind the tree line. The envelope rested in his hands. It was light, just a single sheet of paper folded inside. But it felt heavier than anything he had carried in years. He had waited until the house was quiet, until the street was empty, until there was nothing left but him and the fading light and the words a 7-year-old girl had written for him. He slid his thumb beneath the seal and pulled out the letter. The handwriting was uneven. The letters tilted in different directions like they were still learning how to stand up straight. Some words were misspelled. Some sentences ran together without punctuation. But the meaning was clear. Lily thanked him for saving her and her mom. She said she remembered the truck stop. She remembered being scared. She remembered the man who smiled too much and held her shoulder too tight. She remembered looking across the parking lot and seeing a man in leather standing next to a black motorcycle. She wrote that she did not know if anyone would help. She had stopped believing that strangers could be good, but then she saw Marcus, and something inside her told her he was different. She wrote that her mom had told her about Emma. Marcus stopped reading. His chest tightened. His hands trembled against the paper. He forced himself to continue. Lily said she thought about Emma a lot. She wondered what Emma was like. She wondered if Emma liked to draw pictures or ride bicycles or watch the clouds move across the sky. She wrote that she believed Emma had sent Marcus to find them. She said maybe Emma was watching from somewhere far away and saw a little girl who needed help. Maybe Emma whispered in her daddy's ear and told him to look across the parking lot. Maybe that was why Marcus saw her when no one else did. Lily hoped Emma was not sad anymore. She hoped Emma knew that her daddy still helped little girls. She hoped Emma was proud. At the bottom of the letter, in shaky capital letters, Lily had written 3 words. "Thank you, Ghost." Marcus read the letter 3 times. He read it until the words blurred and his vision became water. Then he folded the paper carefully along its creases. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. He opened it to the space behind his license where Emma's photograph had rested for 8 years. He placed the letter beside the photograph. 2 pieces of paper. 2 daughters. One he had lost. One he had found. He closed the wallet and held it against his chest. For the first time in 8 years, Marcus cried without trying to stop himself. He did not cry from grief. He had done that crying long ago, in the dark months after Emma's funeral, when the world felt like a wound that would never heal. This was different. This was release. This was the feeling of a weight lifting from his shoulders. The feeling that his daughter's death had not been meaningless. The feeling that love could travel through time and strangers and impossible moments to reach someone new. Emma had not been erased. She had become part of something larger. She had become the reason Marcus knew how to see a child in danger. She had become the reason he did not look away. She had saved Lily through him. Marcus stayed on the porch until the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. He did not move. He did not speak. He simply sat with the knowledge settling into his bones. When the night had fully arrived, he stood and walked inside. He picked up his phone and dialed Sarah's number. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm and curious. Marcus told her he had read the letter. He told her it meant more than he could explain. He said Lily had given him something he did not know he needed. Then he asked if he could be Lily's godfather. The words came out before he had time to second-guess them. He had not planned to ask. He did not know if it was appropriate, but the question felt right in a way he could not ignore. Sarah was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. She said yes before he finished the sentence. Marcus thanked her quietly and said goodnight. He hung up the phone and stood in the middle of his living room with his hand still resting on the device. Something had shifted inside him. Something that had been broken for 8 years was finally beginning to mend. The following Sunday, Marcus pulled up to Sarah's apartment building with 3 trucks behind him. His brothers climbed out one by one, carrying something large wrapped in a blue tarp. Lily ran outside to meet them. Her eyes went wide when she saw the shape beneath the covering. Marcus told her they had brought her something that would change how she saw the world. Lily ran out the front door before Marcus had even stepped out of his truck. Her eyes locked onto the shape beneath the blue tarp. It was large and low to the ground. It had 2 wheels. She knew what it was before anyone said a word. She stopped at the edge of the sidewalk and stared. Her hands hung at her sides. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Marcus walked toward her with his brothers following close behind. They set the covered shape on the pavement and stepped back. Marcus knelt down beside Lily and asked if she was ready. She nodded without blinking. He pulled the tarp away. The motorcycle was small and electric and painted a deep shade of purple. It had training wheels on the sides and handlebars wrapped in silver tape. A helmet sat on the seat with a bow stuck to the top. Lily screamed. She threw her arms around Marcus and held on with a grip that said more than any letter ever could. He wrapped his arms around her and closed his eyes. Sarah stood on the sidewalk with tears running down her face. She did not wipe them away. She did not try to speak. She simply watched her daughter hold on to the man who had become her family. That afternoon, Marcus taught Lily to ride in the parking lot behind the apartment building. He held the back of the seat while she wobbled. He jogged beside her while she found her balance. He cheered when she finally pulled away on her own, her small hands gripping the handlebars, her laughter echoing off the brick walls. She flew. Sarah watched from the curb with her arms crossed over her chest, and a smile she had forgotten she knew how to wear. The sun was warm. The sky was clear. Her daughter was safe and happy and free. This was what healing looked like. The club's advocacy work continued to grow in the months that followed. They expanded into neighboring towns. They trained new members to recognize the signs that Lily had once displayed. They built a network of protectors who watched for the silent signals that only careful eyes could see. Derek Hollins was convicted on multiple counts of trafficking and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to 23 years in federal prison. His network was dismantled. The others who had worked with him were tracked down and prosecuted. Victims who had been lost for years were finally found and given the support they needed to rebuild their lives. Sarah became a certified advocate for trafficking survivors. She spoke at schools and community centers across the region. She taught parents what to watch for. She taught children that it was okay to ask for help. She told her story without shame because she knew that shame protected predators and silence kept victims trapped. Lily grew up knowing that family was not always blood. Sometimes family was a stranger who chose to see you when no one else was looking. Sometimes family wore leather and rode motorcycles and carried pain they never talked about. Sometimes family was built from broken pieces that fit together in unexpected ways. Marcus never stopped riding. He never stopped watching. He never stopped believing that one moment of courage could change a life forever. On the anniversary of Emma's death, he rode out to the cemetery where she was buried. The headstone was small and simple. Her name was carved into the granite beside the dates that marked her brief time on Earth. Marcus knelt in the grass and pulled a photograph from his pocket. It showed Lily on her purple motorcycle, grinning at the camera with the wind in her hair and joy in her eyes. He placed the photograph beside the headstone and let his hand rest on the cool stone. He whispered that he had kept his promise. He told her that he had not looked away. He told her that her life had meaning because it had taught him how to save someone else. The wind moved through the trees. The leaves rustled softly. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called out and then fell silent. Marcus stood and looked up at the sky. Heroes do not always look like heroes. Sometimes they wear leather. Sometimes they ride alone. Sometimes they carry wounds no one can see. But they show up anyway. They pay attention. They choose to act when everyone else looks away. Safety comes from noticing. It comes from trusting your instincts. It comes from being willing to ask the uncomfortable question. It comes from refusing to believe that someone else will handle it. Every person watching this story has the power to be the stranger who notices, the stranger who speaks up, the stranger who changes everything for someone who has stopped believing that help is possible. That is the legacy Marcus built. That is the legacy Lily will carry forward. That is the legacy that belongs to everyone who chooses to see. Love does not die. It finds new places to land.